Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk to you guys about UX research, which is one of the careers that you could potentially have after your bachelor's degree in psychology. So I know you guys are in an introduction to psychology course. So I kind of just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about one of the careers you could potentially have, what it is, why it's psychology related, why it's cool, and what you could potentially do to get started. So let me go to the next slide. Who I am. My name is Renee. I am a manager of UX research at Oracle Corporation. My D&D class is a druid. I'm very healing-y focused. I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, master's degrees in Human Computer Interaction and User Experience. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And just at a glance, I kind of had about maybe 5 years of research experience in psychology before getting into UX. So I have a lot of experience in psychology, which is why I'm here to talk to you guys today. So talking about UX, what it is, it stands for user experience. It's a very broad kind of term. So Don Norman is a very famous guy in UX. He defined it as encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its product. Technically, that's correct. I just don't really like that definition very much because it sounds very technically, but it's the one that will come up the most common when you Google what it is. But I like to think about it more in terms of you have a person and you have a person is interacting with a thing. That thing is technology. That thing can be this coffee cup. That thing can be a website or an application. That thing is a patient in a hospital. Uh, you know, the the hospital is the thing, not the person, not the patient. But anyway, so it's really about that experience that that person has when they're interacting with this thing. So it's about what users think and what they feel. And there's lots of different ways that we kind of delve into that and we dig into it to kind of better understand. But ultimately, it's about a customer or a person. It's really a person and a thing, a product or a piece of technology, and trying to get in there and make it the best piece of technology we can for that person to meet their needs. And that's very wide, big, kind of umbrella thing there. That can be in healthcare, that can be in shopping on Etsy. There's so many different places that a UX person can kind of go in to try to solve that people-centered problem. So again, I kind of what are the goals and motivations of a UX person? We generally want to focus on making something usable. It needs to be usable in order to use it, right? Make sure that it's useful. We might create something that seems really cool, but if you don't need it, then like why do it? It really has to be something that's going to serve a need that a person has. Make it desirable. We want to make it fun to use. If you can't find it, how can you use it? Accessibility is a big thing. And really, accessibility, can mean so many things. Making something accessible to people who belong into certain kinds of marginalized communities, for example. Making sure that you're not making a piece of technology that's based on heteronormative standards. There's lots of different ways you can kind of approach that. And then credible, making sure that it's something that's to help people. That's really foundational there. We want it to be something that actually works, and we want to make sure that it's something that helps people. And UX people help bridge that gap. And that's just a funny meme why UX research is important. I mean, the cup's really pretty, but does it hurt you to use it? What's the questions that we need to answer? The personality of a UXer. So we often will describe ourselves, or other people will describe us, as UX unicorns. I don't really know how this started, to be honest, but it is a very big thing. Like UX and unicorns, it's just kind of like the symbol of UXers. And there's kind of a reason why. And it's because UXers tend to be, we're kind of weird and we're kind of rare. We're a very interesting combination of empathy. Empathy is very cornerstone to being a good UX person. I don't think you can be a good UX person if you are not very empathetic by nature. So we tend to be very nice. Whereas a lot of creativity that you have, we're also very excitable. I'm making generalizations. Everybody's got their own personalities, but in general, we tend to be like very empathetic. We tend to be very creative. We have a lot of curiosity. We want to know why, like, interesting. Why did you do that? Which is what brings us into psychology, because we use a lot of psychology in lots of different ways in order to kind of understand human behavior, because that's very foundational to what UX is. Experimentation, that kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with psychology and psychology research, which I'll get into in a minute. Philosophy, we philosophize a lot. Collaboration, we too tend to be collaborative. Some of us will like work on projects by ourselves for a long while, and then we just kind of want to like show it to people and be like, "Ooh, what do you think?" But yes, we tend to be a little bit of a rare combination of things. We're not a typical tech person by any standards at all, which is why we're a weird unicorn. So UX kind of sits again, it sits between psychology, the way it makes you feel, science, which psychology can be a science. So I don't know how I feel about separating those two things together, but think about it in terms of, the way that something works and sort of measuring human behavior, and art, the way that it looks, that sort of aesthetic. How does it make you feel when you look at it? So very quickly, I also wanted to mention that there is a difference between UX research and UX design. So this is a bugaboo of mine. Whenever you Google UX, you're going to find most of the things that are going to come up are going to be about UX design as a career, being a UX designer. There is the possibility of doing both UX design and UX research. There's lots of designers who also do research, absolutely. But there are also two distinct paths. You can be a UX researcher who doesn't do design. And there's tons and tons and tons of career like jobs out there just looking for a UX researcher that's not requiring you to have like any kind of real technical experience. I'm not a tech savvy person. I mean, I know how to use PowerPoint, right? And I know how to use like some basic things, don't get me wrong, but I'm not, I would not call myself a tech savvy person. I'm really not like a programmer or anything like that. And I do just fine. So a lot of times I have a little bugaboo of mine, and you Google UX careers, it'll talk about UX design as a career, and it'll like steer some people away because they're like, oh, I don't have any of those skills. They're different paths. Some companies, again, they will ask you to do both of those things, but they'll write that in the job description. But if you just want to go into a UX research path, you can do that. If you just want to go into a UX design path, you can do it. Both of them use psychology. Both of them use certain amounts of like measuring behavior and empathizing with the users. Both of them do that, but they usually serve different functions and then work together. Okay. So some top skills that a UX researcher would have, because that's what I can talk about a little bit more than the design part of it. Number one is understanding people and psychology. It's, again, psychology and UX are very interlinked with each other. Number two, understanding UX design techniques. You don't have to be a designer, and you don't have to execute those techniques, but it might be pretty useful for you to just like read about them and like learn a little bit about them so that you can work with designers and you guys can pair together. So that's what I do. I really didn't know anything about design when I got started in UX, to be honest. Now I know a little bit more than I did when I started, but I don't do design, they do, but it helps me sometimes to know different design techniques so I can help build research studies that complement it. Knowing UX research tools. These are pretty much the same as psychology research tools, if I'm honest. They call them some different things, and we'll talk about that in just like a second, but they're pretty much just psychology research tools that industry has adapted for their own purposes. Communication skills. We are very excited people who like to communicate our ideas and be like, oh, we found this really cool thing. Please like listen to me talk about it. So that's a very, central thing that we do. Industry knowledge. I don't know about that one. I didn't really know a ton about industry when I got started, and I learned pretty fast. There are books and articles and things like that. And if you're so inclined, you can go, it helps to read some articles about, UX and industry. Absolutely. I wouldn't say you need to like be an expert at knowing the ins and outs of industry. Nah. Analytics, that's like just kind of goes hand in hand with research skills. Like you'll learn how to synthesize, you'll learn how to analyze the results. So you're going to do like fun psychology research studies. Maybe you're going to do, and I'll talk about in a second, maybe you'll do interviews, maybe you'll do surveys, but then you want to analyze what did you learn from that, and then how do you apply it to so that people can have a better experience. How can you make recommendations to those people in industry that here's what I found out about how this patient was interacting with the medicine prescription applications that you gave them. Maybe they were having a hard time knowing when to take their medication because the way that you color coded this is just not very user friendly, and it doesn't map onto that person's like cognitive skills very well. So here's my recommendation to make it easier for you to create an application that they can actually read and they can use, and they can take their prescription medication on time. So that's just kind of what that means. And empathy, honestly, I'd probably bump empathy up to like maybe number one or number two. Again, it's very central to what we do. We empathize with people, and that's a huge motivating, driving factor in what we do. But it also helps us to think about questions that we want to explore and dig into the user's experience a little bit more, because we're putting ourselves in their shoes. We're trying to walk that walk. And I think that that's one of the things that sets us apart from so many other careers in tech, so to speak. It feels weird saying this is a tech career because it is a tech career, but it doesn't feel like that to me so often because I'm not a techie person. I'm a people person that works in tech, if that makes sense. So kind of touching again on UX and psychology, how is UX, what is the relationship between UX and psychology? I mean, it's a very integral part. We use psychology to understand the user's experience. And you'll see this phrase design psychology will sometimes come up because UX tends to usually sit oftentimes in a design department, and you work with designers. Those two things get paired together. So design psychology is a combination of neuroscience, cognitive psychology, social psychology, and human-computer interaction, and approaches the user experience through the lens of human behavior. Now, not every UX person does neuroscience. I just want to clarify that. Not every UX person does specific types of psychology research. But depending upon where you go to do UX stuff at, they sometimes do. A little less common to do neuroscience. But if you fall in love with like certain types of research methods, is what I mean to say, there are industries out there that use those to answer some of these UX questions. So cognitive psychology and social psychology kind of are a big part of what human-computer interaction is. So that big long term just basically means, how does a person interact with a computer or a piece of technology? And foundational to that is social psychology, how people interact with others and with groups of people, and cognitive psychology, how attention and working memory and all that fun stuff kind of plays into that. But yeah, that's just kind of what that term means. So broadly, UX research methods, I don't want to get too into, because I'm sure you're gonna take, research methods maybe later on if you're interested in that. But just know broadly that there's like quantitative research and there's qualitative research. I see careers that will either do primarily qualitative research. So if you like really just like the qualitative part of it, you like answering questions about why, you like getting open-ended, rich feedback from people. Maybe you just really like doing interviews with them. Maybe you really like going and like just kind of observing and viewing them in their natural environment while interacting with something. You can be just a qualitative UX research person and never do the quantitative stuff. You can also be more of a quantitative person if you really like numbers and statistics. You really like measuring things. So maybe you really like doing surveys with, closed responses. Maybe you really like statistics if you're that kind of person. Then you might like just going more into a quantitative research, UX research path and just doing that. And those fields exist as well. Or you do a blend of both. You could be a mixed methods UX researcher where you do a little bit of qualitative and you do a little bit of quantitative in order to answer whatever questions you want about human behavior. I'm more of a mixed methods researcher. I used to be more just quantitative. I now embrace a lot of really fun qualitative research methods. So that's kind of where I sit. But again, there are fields in both if you've got a preference. And at a glance, here are just some of the broad UX research methods that we use. These are psychology research methods that are called different things sometimes, and are just been adapted from psych research for industry purposes. So card sorting, you'll see that in psychology research papers all the time. It's just kind of like you've got cards, virtual or in person, and people arrange them in certain ways so that you can see how they group things together. Maybe you want to look at, I don't know, how do people categorize different types of coffee? And maybe you want to look at the differences between, different cultures. You could potentially do a card sorting test and see how people group coffee subject names together and then compare them across continents. I'm thinking of coffee because I'm drinking coffee and it's good. So all my examples are probably going to be coffee related from here on out. Usability testing is a very bread and buttery kind of UX research method thing. That's just like where you have, let's say maybe you have a working prototype, let's say of a coffee website. And you want to see if it's actually usable. You want to make sure that like it's good before you hit publish on it and people use it, and then you find out it's not so great. So you might do a test with it first, and you'll structure maybe a little task where you're like, pretend that you are buying coffee and now you want to click on the checkout box to purchase your coffee. Where would you go to do that? And then you'll watch people kind of interact with that like prototype website, and then make observations and things like that about how they did on the task. A/B testing, just very broadly, kind of just sort of means like you've got two different versions of something, two or more, and you want to test which one people like more. And there's lots and lots of different ways that you can do that. You can get more as in-depth or as not in-depth as you really want to get with that. Interviews, I'm gonna talk to another person about stuff and ask some questions. Surveys, you know what that is. Diary studies, so maybe they'll have a prompt that they're going to kind of answer, or maybe a set of questions they're going to answer. Write in like open-ended feedback while they're doing a thing. Like, every time you drink coffee over the next week, can you please write a diary entry talking about your experience drinking coffee? Stuff like that. Contextual observation, you're going to observe them in their natural habitat, which is really cool. Anyway, those are just some methods at a glance. So how does a person get started in UX? I'll just very briefly talk about my journey in getting started in UX, with the understanding that there are so many different paths to getting started, and there are tons and tons of different backgrounds that people have getting started. I didn't know it. I didn't know that I was going to be going into UX. That wasn't something like I set out on a path to do. And most people that I know that got into UX didn't start out on a path to get into it. I had my bachelor's degree in psychology. I liked psychology because I'm a people person. All the things. I like empathizing with people. I like thinking about people and how they behave and interact with things. So that was a very natural fit for me. And I got involved in psychology research as an undergraduate. I joined some labs. I volunteered in a couple of different labs, and I got very heavily involved in those. So those labs were kind of looking at, it was called a field called human factors psychology, which basically looks at how people interact with technology. I didn't realize I was learning about UX, but that's kind of what I was. And it was sort of looking at it from like cognitive psychology standpoints. So it was a really interesting field. I have about 3 years of research experience from there, working in a couple of different labs. I actually did another couple of years of research experience at Lehigh University, working in a couple of different labs. And then I transitioned into a senior UX research position at Oracle. And it was just just a glove and a fit. And it was just all the things that like my personality liked doing, it just sort of fit together. Again, was never a super techie person, so I was surprised to find out that I loved being in a tech field so much, but that's because it's a very unusual tech field. It's not a typical tech field at all. Um, but anyway, so typically degrees that I see getting started, human computer interaction, more often than not, I see psychology. That is a really huge field that people go into before getting involved in UX because, again, they pair together so well. Maybe some people did degrees in design. I do see anthropology, that one comes up quite a bit. Sociology as well, that's not on the list, but sociology I see quite a bit. Anthropology is a huge one, though. There's a woman who's like very inspirational, and she's a like UX research director at like Etsy, and she has a bachelor's degree in anthropology, and she wrote an article that like talked about how anthropology was such an interesting pathway for her into UX. But their degrees are typically ones that make you think about people, and it makes you think about people from the perspective of how they behave and interact with their environment, and then teaches you some research methods of how to do that a little bit. So another critical way to get started is to gain research experience. So you can find things like UX internships. They absolutely exist. I've got a couple interns on my team that I manage, and they didn't have a ton of no UX experience before they did the internship. I have a UX research intern on my team, and he was a communications and histories major who just happened to see the internship posting by chance, and he loves it now, and he's like, can you help this be like my full-time career? So there's definitely possibilities out there if you look into that. Undergraduate research projects are another great way to kind of get experience in research and putting something on your portfolio, which is usually how you get hired. You get involved in research projects and you can put that project on your portfolio. Another way is volunteering in like a psychology lab. That's how I got started. That's how a lot of people got started. It'll help you get your foot in the door in learning more about research, how it's run. And then maybe you can, from there, get involved in projects and put those projects on your portfolio. So I'll say that sometimes when you look around, you'll see like job postings will talk about master's or a PhD. Don't be scared by that. I know tons and tons and tons of people who don't have either, who got their foot, who have great careers in UX. And that's because at the end of the day, what it's really more about is about your portfolio pieces and having cool, interesting projects that you can talk through a little bit. So you can do that without having degrees. So the degrees just sometimes help you get that experience, and they sometimes help you get those projects. If you do a PhD in psychology, you're going to do a lot of research projects. Those research projects are your portfolio pieces, and those portfolio pieces are what get you your first job. Same thing with master's degree, same thing with an undergrad degree. If you get involved in research and you get involved with projects, those are the things that really get you into the door. And lastly, getting started is building your network. I strongly advocate, if you haven't, go on LinkedIn, make a profile. You can go on Twitter too. Sometimes you can connect with people on there, but you want to just start talking to people. I have people message me that I've never met before. Sometimes like, hi, I'm really interested in getting started in UX. I know it's a long shot, but would you, be willing to talk to me for a couple of minutes? And I can't speak for everybody else, but I always talk to those people. I've scheduled little, video call chats on Saturday mornings just to chat with them for a few minutes and talk to them. And if I do that, I'm sure lots of other people do that too. So, don't be afraid, kind of go out there and talk to people, see what they think, and if it's something that would be interesting for you. Anyway, if you want to know more on that note, please feel free to email me. It's this really long email, so I apologize. My last name is just crazy, but it's renee.sahajian@oracle.com. Feel free to screenshot that if you'd like. If you ever want to email me or message me, let me know. You can also reach out to your amazing professor, Laura Walter, because we're friends. And so if you decide like you ever want to reach out to me and you didn't screenshot that, just ask her and she'll put you in touch with me. But I'm always happy to answer any questions about, I don't know, anything or share funny memes. That's also fun. That's all I have for you. Enjoy the rest of your course. You've got an amazing instructor and yeah, have a good day, guys. Bye.